Hi all, it's Michelle Houghton, and I am specially welcoming all the Kraftin Kimmie friends that are stopping by as part of a big fun weekend of coloring and crafting together with the May release. And I am pre-recording this because I am in Alaska. And not specifically because of that, but because my schedule has been thrown all out of whack. And so we're trying this. I'm just going to have it ready to go for you guys on Sunday morning. And so you can tune into this when Kim kind of gives you the link, or if you find it before that, that's okay. But I didn't want to miss out participating. And so she let me do this ahead of time. And I'm going to talk right along with my coloring, so no speeding up. It's still we're gonna try to do the same length. We're gonna see if this works. If partway through it doesn't work and I have to do some voiceover and speed up, I apologize for that. Some of it we'll have to do if I can get that big of a video uploaded to YouTube, but we are gonna see and go for it. So the stamp set that I am using is the Fairy Houses, and I'm gonna color up the teapot. I had done a colored pencil of the little stump, and that was really, really fun to do. I did this on a really inexpensive craft cardstock with Prismacolor pencils. And then today I'm gonna use my Copics, and I am working on, this is a hammer mill, and I have to feel it because I have like 3 or 4 different papers sitting around, but this one's a hammer mill. So I'm gonna do the teapot. And I was not lucky enough in April to get the fairy friends, but I did manage to snag an older set of fairies. So I grabbed these guys because they fit with the little fairy houses equally as well. And actually on Kraftin Kimmie, there are a ton of those fairy sets. So you can absolutely find some friends to go along with your little fairy houses, or you can do the fairy houses by themselves. I'm gonna focus in on the teapot first, and we're gonna see how long that takes me. I did not do any pre-coloring. I snatched out some Copic colors, and we're gonna see how well that works. So we're definitely playing as we go. And then if I have time, I will also do the little fairy and a little bit of a background, but I'm gonna try to hold this to right at around 45 minutes or so, because I feel like that is probably what we need to hold that to. So let's see how this works. I'm gonna start with the teapot and the bulk of the teapot. I'm gonna do kind of a standard China teapot that's a white. So I'm actually gonna use some blue violets to add that shape back in there. So I'm gonna use a BB20 and a little bit of BB23 along with my colorless blender, or the Z marker marked with a 0. So let's see, I'm gonna try to zoom in just a tiny bit and see if I can stay on screen for you. So I'm going to start with that BV20, and I'm going to flick in from the edge, getting a little bit longer flicks when I get down toward the bottom. This is a very spherical or round shape, so I'm trying to give it that shape. Now all these little vines are going to add a little bit of a challenge because I'm having to work around them as best I can. It'll go in a little bit further across the neck where it dips in, and it might even go all the way across. We'll kind of play around with that. We've got this little window, and that might end up being a little bit different color. We'll kind of play with that piece. I'm definitely going to do the lid a different color. And then I'm going to come down and get the underside of the spout. I am assuming she is outdoors, that she has planted her little teapot in a garden somewhere. So she's getting some beautiful sunshine from up above, which I hope all of you are getting these days. Good grief, we need it. Everybody could use a little vitamin D right now, me included, which I am getting more than my share of at the moment in Alaska because our sunset is not happening until, it actually doesn't really happen. We pretty much have light all the way through the night right now. It's not like daylight, but it's light. Then I'm going to come over to the handle. The handles to me are some of the hardest. So I'm thinking about that light coming in from above. So it's kind of hitting that top. And then it comes up, the shadow is going to come up from that underside. But then it bends around, and again, I'm looking for the underside, the part that's curved away from that light source. So I think I'm pretty good there. So the last piece would be this little overhang. I'm actually thinking those two overhangs should probably match the lid. So I think I can come back and change that here in a minute. And that will work. And then I'm going to do a tiny, tiny bit of BV23 into some of these darkest little spots. And these are going to be very limited because I still want the teapot to actually look white. So near the base of the teapot, kind of behind these vines, where I think it's going to be in the deepest shadow. So I'll have a little more on this side because I've got all these leaves that are going to create some deeper shadowing along that edge. Go into the interior of the spout. It's a little hard to tell. I think I got the right lines in there. This is one of those your friends, your good friends, aren't going to look too hard at. They're just going to say, oh, it's so pretty. They're not going to be like, ooh, that little triangle there in between that leaf and that leaf should have been this. Not a good friend. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and add this BV23 on the underside of that window shade, even though I'm going to create a different color on that. Perfect, okay. Then I want to smooth this out. This is a porcelain or ceramic teapot. So I'm going to go back with my BV20 and I'm going to go right on that edge. And I use a mix of kind of circling on that dried edge of ink, the BV23, and then flicking out into the BV20 that's sitting there. Everybody does this different, and this is one of those pieces of Copic coloring and art in general that you have to find a way that works for you. The way I think about it is that I'm re-wetting that darker color a little bit, that edge, and then pulling it into that lighter color. At least in my head, that's what's going on. And that seems to work for me. You'll see a lot of Copic artists, or several Copic artists, that start with their dark marker and then just pull into the light. That works really, really well for them. And that is awesome. For me, if I'm trying to blend really smooth, this tends to work better for me, at least with some color combinations. Now I'm going to come in with my colorless blender, and now I'm going to hit the edge, and I'm going to hit it pretty hard of that BV20. And this is one of my favorite Copic colors. A lot of you have heard this before because of this neat thing that happens. With the BV20, as you hit it with that alcohol solution that's in the colorless blender, remember that's the alcohol that all Copic ink is suspended in or mixed with in the marker body. As we hit it with that alcohol solution, it separates, or it looks like to me that it kind of separates the violet and the blue in the BV, or the blue violet. And so what we have left is this kind of shadow of blue that fades then into that violet color as we go out into those darker areas and into the darker blue violet, into those deeper shadows. And I just feel like it's such a pretty effect. It's one of my favorite little tricks when shading something white, especially something that I want to look smooth and cool, like cool to the touch, cool in temperature. I just feel like that does a really nice job of that. Now you're going to notice, because these leaves are so small and that detail's so small, I've got some overbleed happening here. I am not going to worry about that. The greens and browns I'm going to bring back in for the leaves are going to completely fill that in. So no problemo. All right. So that, I think, for me is the body of the teapot. And then we've got this little top and these little kind of covers. So I'm going to do that with some violets. I'm going to start with a V1, 2 and fill that in, and I'll fill in all 3 pieces. Now, if you are not super quick and you want to do one at a time, that works as well. The reason for doing it one at a time instead of all 3 would be that you can keep your ink a little more wet. And if your ink is wet, it's going to blend more easily. We want it wet to blend. So if you're a little slower still, or maybe you just need to take your time around those corners, and that is absolutely okay. But you might consider doing one section at a time. This top is kind of a half sphere, even though I've got this wave at the bottom. It's kind of a half sphere, so I'm trying to make sure I get that shape to read that way. Get the curves, again, kind of curving over. And softening those up by coming back with the V1, 2. So the bummer part about me recording this earlier is I don't get to chat with you guys, and I don't get to answer questions that you have while I'm coloring. So I'm trying to think of things you might ask while I'm going along. This is one of my favorite violet combinations, even though I'm working with a different saturation number. That V1, 2 and the 0, 4. So that first number is that saturation number, the 1 and the 0. Even though those numbers are different, those two work really, really well together. And I know that because I have played with them. The best way to test out color combinations, get them out and color with them. All right, I'm going to do some gold accents on the top and on the trim and the trim. And I think this should have been trim. I'm guessing that's holding that little shutter up. So maybe we'll do that like it's wood, more like door. All right. So I have a Y21 that I started with, and then I'm going to use a Y28. Now, if you have not used this color before, Y28 is powerful. It does not look like that color that's on the lid. It's called Lionette Gold, but it's not metallic. If you had a metallic and wanted to add that to make this shiny, you sure could. That would be fun. And I could always go back and add like glossy accents or something over it, or a gold leaf. There's all sorts of gold things out there these days. There are tons in the crafty world. My guess is Kim has supplied you with more than your fair share, because she's always so good about keeping those crafty studios full of goodness. All right, Y21, just up here on this little knob. There we go. I like that color combo for kind of a burnished gold look. The other thing I could do is come back and do white highlights. I don't do a lot of those, but you could on something shiny like that. I could have left a white highlight as well. So let's move on. Oh, I was going to do the door handle, sorry. So I'll do the door handle, gold as well, and then we'll get the door. We'll do that guy next. So top and top. All right, so I'm going to use 3 colors on the door. These are colors I use a lot for wood. So I'm gonna use a E31 to start. I'm having a hard time seeing if these are ending up in your screen or not. So E31, and I'm gonna fill the door with that color. And I'm trying to do a pretty light wash. This does not need to be like really solid. So I don't need to go through and like do little circles and stuff. I'm really just trying to get a first coat down, and it does not need to be even or smooth. In fact, I kind of rather it not be. My second color is an E35. If I can even show you, there's areas that I have quite a bit of color, nice and smooth blending, and then you can see that door, that first coat, very little ink. We can just barely see it showing through. So I gave that a second to kind of do a little air drying, and then I'm gonna go with the wood grain. So I wanna go side to side. If I had something that had vertical boards, I would actually turn it so I could go side to side with my hand. Most of our hands go horizontally more easily. So find that angle that yours works at, and we're gonna go nice and quick. We're gonna kind of run kind of wiggly lines back and forth. Now the trick is I do want to start right at the edge, and so I have to kind of slowly place my pen, my marker, and then work my way across. But these should be wiggly. And I am using my brush nib. I'm holding it pretty close to the nib. I've gone way down on my marker, so I have some control. But I'm just working my way back and forth. Some of the lines stop, some of them continue all the way across. All right, just about there. And then I'm gonna go a little bit more at the edges. I'm going to find the edges of those boards, and I'm going to reinforce that, because I'm assuming that this little door is kind of recessed into the teapot, kind of set back in. So by hitting those edges kind of a second time, even with the same color, it's going to help push those edges in. Hit a few of the little knots. All right. Then I'm going to use a third color, totally optional, but I'm going to come in with an E25. So I went from an E35 to an E25. 2.5 is considerably darker, or just a nice jump darker than the 3.5. And I feel like, personally, that the 2.5 pushes things back a little bit better. It seems to be a cooler color to me, or grayed down a little bit, one or the other. I think just cooler for the most part. And so when I lay that down as my third layer on wood objects, I feel like it really gives it a little bit more dimension and texture. Now, for me, this then is complete. I stop. I'm going to give you one option, and this is completely an option. For me, I like this much texture. I like seeing all that detail, but for some people, they look at it and they're like, all I see is wiggly lines. That is not wood. And it makes their teeth itch. And yes, I still say that. So one option, and you get to do this once on wood grain. You can do it more on a couple other things. I will tell you when. This is a Michelle rule. And you can tell people that Michelle's crazy and she gives us rules. There's not really a rule. This is just a strong suggestion. If you want to soften that texture, you're going to take that E31 and literally very, very lightly brush across that wood grain. You're going to go one pass all the way from top to bottom and stop. You're not going to circle. You're not going to go back and do a second layer. You're going to do one, and you're going to stop, and you're going to let it sit until it's completely dry, which means you have to go do something else and then come back to it. The reason for that is while that ink is drying, it's still moving. And so we want to give it time to settle and really see what it looks like. But a lot of times, even that one pass is just enough to soften those edges and take the edge off. And so a lot of people are happier with it with that. While coloring the door, I realized that there are two hinges on the little door. So I'm going to come back with that Y28. I'm not going to try to get both yellows in there. Probably should have. I'm going to put that Y28, maybe I'll go in reverse. A little bit of Y21. Yeah. That's a little too dark. There we go. To add those hinges, because if the door handle is that, the hinges probably are as well. All right. Then we have these beautiful vines. And I am going to start, actually changing my mind. I'm going to start with an E43 on all of the vines. So E4s have kind of a gray, little bit of a gray undertone to them. It's a nice brown, works really well for hair color. I was trying just to cool down the vine so it's a little bit different than the door. You do not need to change the color. In fact, sometimes I go a little too crazy and add too many colors, and then the image is just overwhelming. So always be cautious of that. But I just felt like for this, I was kind of use the opportunity, since the teapot itself is very bright and vibrant, that the foliage on it would be cooled down a little, kind of a little desaturated. So that was an E43, and then I'm going to use an E44. There's a big jump between these two if you haven't used these before. And I'm going to come along some of the bottom edges or one side of the vine work. Could switch sides. Again, this is one of those times where if your friend's a good friend, they're not looking and being, oh wait, your shadow skipped sides. We're really more trying to give some variation to this, some in and out. We're not going for realism. We're going for some fun, bright color that is striking when we look at it. We're going to get that. All right. If we were going for photorealism, we probably would not be coloring this particular image. Although we could make it more realistic, but we'd probably need to remove the fairy and do a couple other things. So I'm going for fun. Fun, good color. And if you want, you can find a few spots to add a little E47 and push some of those little spots way back. Maybe some spots coming out from behind other pieces. Or places you know are kind of tucked away from the sunshine. It's probably just enough. And then I'm going to go back with that first color, that E, kind of like what I did on the door, E43, and just real lightly kind of soften some of that together. I'm not really trying to blend it. It's too small. That'd be crazy. But I am trying to soften some of that. We talked about doing that the door color, didn't we? All right, I'll come back here in a second. Okay, so before I forget it completely, going to do the E3 one. I think just the E3-5. This guy over here. That'll work. It got a little broad, but I'll push that back in with the sky color when we get there, if we get there. Then we've got some leaves. I'm going to do kind of two colors. I've got a YG61. I'll hit all of those first, and then I'll come back with YG63. And see how we do there. I have to find some music to play in the background for you guys as I do stuff like this where I'm coloring each little leaf. Because you definitely don't want to hear me sing. I'm more of a hummer though. My father is a hummer and I am a hummer as well. Kind of twiddling along, and it's not really any tune in particular. It's just kind of humming. All right, so we've got a base coat of that YG61, and then I'm gonna come back. That's a lot of leaves. So I'm gonna come back. I feel like they've gotta have a little bit of interest there because there's so many of them that if it's just that one flat color, we're in trouble. So I'm gonna do kind of a little 1, 2, 3 on most of these guys. If they're bigger, they might get more little flicks out from that center. I'm starting right where that stem seems to, so some of these are going to get 4 or 5. A lot of the small ones will only get 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a big one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. And then it's going to be your option on what you want to do from there. If you like to soften that, you can. This is one of those times I may not. There are a lot of times I'm finding as of late that I would rather just leave it as is and have some of that texture shine through, and the brush strokes. It's handmade. It's okay to show that it's an artistic piece. All right. So if you wanted to add, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering if it needs one more layer on those leaves, and I'm thinking it does, sorry. So I'm gonna go in and add like a stroke and a dot or 2 dots. And maybe even just that center. Yep, just even the center. This is the YG67. Yeah, I think I like that better. See, this is what you get when I haven't done any work ahead of time. This is how I color. Kind of play with it. All right, so here we go. And then we've got a window, and I'm gonna leave this really, really simple. Again, this is not realism. I'm gonna use a little BG 000, and I'm gonna come in mostly from this underside, tiny, or this left side, tiny bit from the right. And then I'm gonna use my colorless blender so that we've got kind of that sky reflected in the glass. And there, my friends, is a beautiful little teapot. There's one little thing kind of bugging me. So I'm gonna work on erasing that, but I'm gonna have to do it in pieces. So I hit it with colorless blender. And remember, it's the idea of pushing the color. So I'm gonna try to push it back in that way a little bit. And I might have to do it in stages. So I just started at that. Let's see, we've been about 40 minutes or so. Let's do this. This was really my focus. This is what I wanted to get done with you guys. So I think let's do this. I am going to do a second video, and I'm going to color the fairy, and I'm going to color the background, but I'm going to put it in a second piece. What I promise I will do though is I will do it in real time, like what I just did now. And I'm going to put it as a second post so that, because I feel like 45 minutes is probably going to be the biggest upload that I can manage. I haven't even attempted it, so we'll see if it even works. But I hate to go any longer, but I'll do a second video with the fairy and the background, and I will post that within the next couple days, so you get both of them. At the very latest, it could be Wednesday's video on Copic in the craft room, but I promise I'll let Kim know. She can let you know right when you guys have access to this one, when the next one is coming out, okay? Thank you, ladies. I hope you're having a spectacular weekend, and I hope you are playing along with all the Kraftin Kimmie fun stuff. See you guys later.